The recession has started in my opinion, but there are a few missing pieces, at least in the market, that tells us that we still have higher to go. And in today's video, we're going to talk about all of them. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Christian. I have only 22 videos on my channel, and you are invited to subscribe to stay, in my opinion, on the right side of the trade, as I have been since the bottom in 2022. Not too many videos for you to binge watch, and if you watch all of them, I promise you, you will better understand my view on the markets. Now, what happens when we get into a recession? We get rate cuts. So this whole cycle of rate cuts from 2019 into the pandemic, we saw Bitcoin do this downtrend with a final push of 65% just before the COVID crash. So the first missing piece before something like this could occur is, in my opinion, to be seen on the rate cuts cycle. So where are we today? We are at 4% interest rates, and Bitcoin is looking like it wants to do something like a bear flag. Maybe it's validated, maybe we see the lows again, but in my opinion, we still have something like this to see while the rates are being kept paused or they are being cut. The next missing piece is actually the US 3-month. In the past videos, we talked about this delta, basically discounting the yield level from the rate level. So when we had the rates at 450 basis points, we had the yields just below something like 20 to 30 basis points. So the delta should be something like between 20 and 30 basis points to keep this healthy delta, because if not, we would be having a cascading move down for the yields, and this could mean panic cuts, and this is triggering this recession that all people are talking about today, but we are not there yet, in my opinion. Today we have the FOMC, and the chances for a new rate cut are growing, but the delta right now, from where we are with the rates at 4%, just increased for a bit, and I do not know if it's enough for them to cut the rates. But if they do, this is totally a normalization cut and not a panic cut. Just like we had in 2024, where the Fed cuts 50 basis points because the yields dropped from 525 into the 450, and the delta was kept positive, and then the rates stabilized in this range, 425 and 450 for the rates, which kept the delta healthy. Another missing piece is the US 10-year. So basically, this is the laggard. You can see here that before the pandemic, we had this stabilizing in a range until February end. But the US 10-year, in this potential bear flag, we started to break down from January. So we had a whole month of warnings until February, and until this one started to crumble down. So right now for the US 10-year, for it to trigger the potential recession and the panic cuts, we need it to drop below this level. And when it does, we have something like 1 to 2 months to prepare for this crumbling down also very fast. And this could come, in my opinion, something like April to May, or all the way to December next year. We will update on it later. Now, if we go into Bitcoin's history, we have just one similar occasion where we were in this situation just before this recession, while yields were stabilizing and Bitcoin put on a bottom on December 17, and then we had a big rally of 62, 64%. I saw a lot of guys that were drawing fractals from 2022, like this one, and just place it down onto our chart today, just mentioning that this is the case again for Bitcoin, but I have a different opinion, because cycles might always repeat, but fractals don't. So if we want a fractal before this happens, meaning the bear market, I think we'll get this one. This would mean a 40%, which is the bear case, basically a test of 116 to 120 for Bitcoin, or a new all-time high going into Q1, something like this, which will invalidate all the people that were posting the same fractal from 2022. And from here, they would need to say, I'm sorry, please let us back into the bull market, and maybe then just have something like this while we cut into normalization, or maybe we pause for 1 to 2 FOMCs, December and January, or cut 25 basis points today and maybe in January. As long as the yields don't do this, we are safe, in my opinion. But then in this case, this could be what's happening next. Maybe not this tragic, but I want to watch how we close the year, and also what the price for Bitcoin is in January and February. For now, this is my base case. Another missing piece that we always have in every cycle is the Bitcoin dominance indicator. Again, if you remember our last posts here on YouTube, we talked about the seasonality for Bitcoin dominance. Every cycle, when we got a big drop into the start of September, the seasonality would reverse and would be strong into November and December, just before this signals the cycle ending with a drop of, let's see, 50% on the Bitcoin dominance, which triggers the last rallies into the altcoin market and Bitcoin topping for the cycle. The same thing with the seasonality can be applied in all years. Let's check the opposite. You can see here that we started September in 2019 with a pump on the Bitcoin dominance and then the other way around until February. Then the dominance reversed. Again, 2020, September start, we have the dump and the other way around until December. Then this happened and triggered the cycle ending. Let's see the big drop in the Bitcoin dominance, 45%. What do we have today? We have this big drop into the start of September, and I was mentioning since then that the next phase for the Bitcoin dominance is up until November or maybe December. And if this is the case, from December into January and February, at the least, we should have the next big drop into Bitcoin's dominance. And from the top, we should measure something like 35, maybe 40%. We will see how January and February or maybe March looks like for the Bitcoin dominance chart. But again, if this happens, the cycle has ended, and me personally, I will be 80% of the market in cash. For now, I am just 20%, waiting for the missing pieces to complete the puzzle. So the other missing piece is Bitcoin making lower highs, while total 3, so all the other altcoins besides Bitcoin and Ethereum should make a higher high, and this right here is where the dominance had completed that big drop. Let's see maybe if this is a coincidence. Going into the 2017 cycle, the same thing happened. Bitcoin topped in December, and into January it had a lower high, while total 3 did a higher high, and this was the point where the Bitcoin dominance dropped and put on the cycle bottom, and this signaled the cycle ending, going into a bear market. Now, where we are today, we have no such trigger. That's why I'm mentioning that this could also be the case for Bitcoin, but I will only know in January, maybe February. Maybe we do something like this and then get off. But again, when we get into this part here, if we do a lower high and this does a higher high, while the Bitcoin dominance drops hard, this would be the last signal for me to exit 80% into cash. Until then, no signal. Now, if you want to ask me, but what if this time is really different? So meaning the Bitcoin dominance shouldn't drop hard to complete the cycle, but the cycle would look something like this. What if this is the case? Now, let's think critically on the chart. No need for opinions, just facts. What happened in this cycle while the Bitcoin dominance and continued to rally up and don't stop? What if the Bitcoin dominance continues to do the same? What should Bitcoin do all over 2026? The same thing that it's been doing until now. Just creep up with higher volatility, while this time is different. So basically, this means going into a super cycle, which I do not think. I do not think that we would have a super cycle. I do think that this is the way for cycle ending, and Bitcoin has another all-time high to do, and then a lower high while the Bitcoin dominance drop, and while total 3 does a higher high. These are the signals for me that the cycle is over and I should be 80% into cash. Just leaving some moon bags, maybe some of them continue higher, I do not know. But as time pivots for me, as explained in other clips, January 20 and April start. This could turn something like this. If we have a big rally into this time pivot and we remain higher, the next phase of the cycle is down hard into that April pivot. If not, and this pivot is actually a pivot low, then this could happen next. Maybe we see this and go down, or maybe we see a new all-time high going into that April pivot and then big down. I'm placing both scenarios in the back of my head, and just be prepared for both of them. Because I got my Bitcoin majorly below 20K, and I sold some here, sold some here. Didn't sell here because my targets were 160, and this could still happen. And if you ask me which scenario I favor the most, I favor this one because this is the most scary for me, in my opinion, because the other one with a pivot low in January and another lower high or higher high into April, this would bring more time to the table for altcoins to outperform, starting with Ethereum. This is a nice breakout for Ethereum versus Bitcoin. So basically another missing piece from this cycle is Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin and signaling the cycle end while the Bitcoin dominance drops, and I do not have targets higher than this one for Ethereum Bitcoin chart. Then doing something like this in 2026, and if this happens, in my opinion, we form a 1, a 2, and a 3 for 5 going into 2028 and 2029, and we take these highs, and Ethereum could massively outperform Bitcoin. And this doesn't mean that Bitcoin isn't going to pump hard. This just means for me that Ethereum could outperform if this is the case this season. And 2026 is actually not a super cycle as the Bitcoin dominance folks all over the internet tell you that the Bitcoin dominance should just go up and Bitcoin is in a bear market, which makes no sense. This tells me that Bitcoin has another higher high to do, but then it could be over very, very quickly. We will see how this unfolds. Also, the USDT dominance looks like we have a top here, but we have some room to see exactly how this cycle unfolds, and I'm totally 100% discounting this scenario right here, just copy pasting the 2022 bear market, and all the people on the internet would buy again the November lows to make a lot of money in the next cycle. That's not how things work. We would have a totally different structure this cycle, meaning the bear cycle, something like this: big down, rebound, high prices, then get into that October, November period of time where everyone wants to buy the cycle bottom, but for Bitcoin just to do something like this maybe. Or we could form a big range here for the market makers to liquidate everyone left and right, and when the bottom comes, no one knows what it's going to look like, leaving everyone sidelined. These are my two main scenarios, and we will see which one of them is unfolding into next year. My bet is still on this one: higher highs, big down, and maybe here into this time window we see something like that lower high that I'm expecting and a higher high on the total tree, while the Bitcoin dominance is crashing hard and signals the end of the cycle. And remember guys, that the actual recession, it doesn't last. It doesn't really last. It's a big drop, just like we had with Terra Luna. This is the big chunk of the bear market. This was, let's see, 64% out of a total of a 77%. This is what you want to avoid. You could have sold Bitcoin also here or here. A lesson I learned in these markets is that you might sell something at the top, more or less, maybe 50%, maybe 30%. Again, at the bottom, you might catch the bottom with 30% or maybe 50% of your money, but you are interested in the chunk of the move. You are interested not to ride all of your gains in the chunk of the move that lasts something like, let's see, this bear market, 76 days, and then the accumulation started. And you want to sell most of your coins into this chunk of the move. So if you remember from my last post, I only have 40% of my Bitcoin left. I sold 60% from here, like 15-20%, and here another 40%. And I'm looking to get rid of it. Even if all bears are right and this is next, I am still selling my Bitcoin very expensive. And I want to avoid carrying the coins to this or to something like this, which let's see, in March, this bear market lasted 10 days. So basically this is my plan for Bitcoin, and I will sell every other coin when I see those triggers and those missing pieces from the puzzle that I've explained in all of this clip. Maybe watch it again, maybe binge watch all the other clips. I'm hoping everyone here has something to learn from it, and consider subscribing. And if you are more advanced, maybe check out the website in my description, gameofliquidity.com. I do a lot of market updates for members. Check out the website, see the presentation, and see my track record. And if you want to take it to the next level, consider joining us. We also have a Discord channel where we talk daily. That's it for today, guys. Have a great week. Let the time in the market reveal the real prices, and just be patient. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.